Like love, everybody. It's your girl Life. Welcome to another episode of Libationz and Conversations, where we're always bringing you guys those good vibes, great conversations, and of course, we can't forget the libations. So today, you see, I have me a nice cup of tea. I'm drinking lemon ginger. We like to keep it balanced here on the show. It's not always about the alcohol. And we're going to get into a great conversation. So I wanted to make sure that I give today's guest my undivided attention as well as you guys. So, it's Saturday. I want to enjoy this weekend and I want to make sure that we always start off everything with good vibes. So we always got a nice little vibe and soundtrack. Uh, Starting off these weekend vibes today. I hope you're enjoying what you're listening to. If so, you can check out this track. Was done by True Knowledge. You can find him on IG. But yeah, we always like to have a nice vibe when we come onto the show and start the day. You got to put that energy out there. Put out what you want to get back, right? All right, y'all. I don't know if you guys saw the little message I have on my cup today, but it says, let it be, buzz. Get the message, y'all. Get the message. I think we need to learn how to do that more often. Today, we have so many conversations, and most of those conversations aren't really getting us anywhere. A lot of those things we're debating and arguing about. And I'm all for a good debate, but if there's some resolution, some solution happening behind it. So today's conversation is about raising the level of communication and how do we do that? So, on my glass, on my cup today, I have it says, let it be, because I'm not the person to do that, because I myself have been a part of those arguments, debates, whatever I thought my perspective or angle I was coming from. So I brought somebody a little bit more versed in the conversations of our community and the things and the reasons of why we do. And he's all about resolutions and solutions. So, where I have neither the time or the crayons to explain this to you. He definitely does. So, without further ado, guys, I want to welcome on James. He's another one of my brothers. He's a wonderful scholar, one of our future minds out here in our community. And he's going to break down what he does and the things that he's learned along the way and give us some solutions or help us strategize and plan on how we can come together on the various conversations that we may not all have the same perspectives on, and how we can kind of strategize and come up with some resolutions and solutions. So without further ado, guys, I want to welcome on James.
Peace and greetings. How are you?
I'm doing great. I'm great. It's
Good.
great to have you on the show.
Good. I'm glad to be here.
Yeah, it's Saturday. I hope I didn't start your day off too soon.
No, I've actually my Saturdays tend to be a little bit more busier than they are during the weekdays because that's when everybody gets to me. 'Cause-
Okay, well, I'm glad
yeah,
I got you early. I hope
yeah,
you get to, wipe me off the list early and you
yeah.
can move on to your
Check,
next
check.
thing.
Yeah.
Exactly. Exactly. Today, guys, James is one of our brothers here that is just sharing some great information about how we grow as a community. Really pull back the layers of the various conversations that we're having that affect our community and help us come up with some reasoning behind it. And then also, how do we put those plans into effect or begin to lay that out and put some action behind that. So I'm gonna let James introduce himself because he has a long list of things and kind of tell us what he does and how he got into the field, and then we'll go from there.
No, thank you. And once again, thank you for having me. Thank you for the collective, the group of which you are a part of, who kind of plugged me in a little bit I guess about a few months ago, maybe earlier this year. And I
Yeah.
really love really love what the collective is doing. I'm
Thank you.
all about
Shout out to the Spliffs and Mischief
absolutely.
Godcast. We got a YouTube channel. Please check us out, guys.
Absolutely. Please check them out. And one of the things then is interesting when you say introduce yourself and talk about, the things that, I tend to really introduce myself as a collective. I'm a composite of everything that was poured into me over a 40 plus years of being on this earth. And I come from a background of folk who were attempting to understand the world through radical change, understand the world through really engaging community, engaging different ideas. I come from a collective of people who poured into me over a number of years, and most of them are still with me to this day. I consider them to be my OGs, or my guides, and those types of things. But unfortunately, there are some who have transitioned and now are within the realm of the ancestors. So I have to listen to them differently now. Before I was able to kind of listen to them in this in a physical sense, meaning that you can call, you can visit, but now I just got to listen differently, right? So, so with that being said, again, my name is James Pope. I have a few letters behind my name, a couple of schools I went to. I went to undergrad at Virginia Commonwealth University, and then of course from there I go to Howard University, and I have and recently, not recently, but back in 2012, I received my PhD. And the reason why I actually went into the university, I was actually pushed. I would say more pushed into the university because me growing up, again, coming from coming from a background of folk who were engaged in activism, who were engaged in really organizing our communities, and not only here in the United States, but also globally in other particular places. One of the things that I would constantly hear, questions that we were engaged in, things that were that were going on, growing up in that 90s period. Of course, for me, I wanted to play basketball, so I thought everything was cool, but also knew that I saw my friends, the jump ball boys, as we used to call them, like the ABC folk. I constantly saw that, but it's this contradiction. And so basketball was like a passport for me. I played basketball, so it allowed me to move in places where a lot of my friends could not move. It allowed me to be accepted in different communities where a lot of my friends would not be accepted, not because of not because of who they were, but because of where they lived, right? We know those community organizations and groups that are formed at different points in time, that tends to be they tend to latch on to their place, right? They represent their place. I'm being very, very diplomatic here,
I
right? So,
appreciate that. I appreciate that. Because again, here on the platform, I talk a lot about raising
Mm,
the frequency, and
mm,
I don't know if you guys know what I mean by that, the platform was created also with the mindset of raising our consciousness.
right.
I think a lot of us walk around sleep. I'm just going to say it what it is. Some of us are totally sleep. Some of us are partially sleep. And some of us are just ignoring. I try to lay things out in different ways, like little breadcrumbs. And I hope to the viewers, I'm doing, I hope you guys are starting to see that. I try to leave little breadcrumbs with conversations that may not be easy for us to have, or we may not agree on, or even myself, I may not agree with something that I hear in a conversation, but there are certain pieces of it that I can relate to.
Hmm.
And I believe anything that makes good sense, has some solid foundation, I think is worth looking into. I
Right.
would say definitely on the platform, don't take our words for it. These are things that you can look up.
Right.
But I try to create a balance so people can see different perspectives. I noticed the conversation of, we have a lot of different disagreements that we're kind of like going on a witch hunt on in a community. And I just don't personally like the direction that I see a lot of these conversations taking. And again, I don't see any solutions or resolutions really being offered. I want you to break down kind of on both sides of it. I want you to lay out, that you have this background and why, what you've learned, but also in layman terms, so they can kind of get both sides of the coin, because we trying to edutain a little bit everybody.
No, I'm with you. And and again, one of my good mentors always, who actually did a lot of work in Black studies. His name is Dr. Abdullah Kalimat. Folk can, you can Google him and see how much he contributed to us. He's still here. He's still with us. And one of the things he always really impressed upon me was, James, you got to make it plain, like Malcolm, like make it plain, make it plain. And so, and it's interesting that you say that, because first starting out on radio in 2008 here in actually Washington D.C. on WPFW on a program called Africa Now. Um, I was in the middle of my PhD program, so I was constantly thinking and reading and stuff, and it was interesting because when I went back and listened to myself, it was like, James, what are you saying? Like you have to, be able to. So interestingly enough, what I've learned to do is to really figure out how do we communicate on multiple levels? How do I say something that you're going to get to through what you understand now, right? So moving us in a particular direction. And I like what you said, this notion of what you're trying to do here. I would consider what you're trying to do and what the whole collective is trying to do is deal with ideas. You're not necessarily, how do we shape our opinions and our personal so-called truths or our personal experiences, and how do we shape them into a framework where we can actually transmit to other people so we can get to collective understandings of what we need to do, because I truly believe we have all of the answers. I truly believe, not individually, but collectively. But how do we merge and understand where your idea or where your limit of knowledge meets my limit of knowledge? And that is where we move and build, build towards or build frameworks towards. So no, I'm with you 100%, and that is the environment that I come from, right? So I'm coming from an environment of what we call scholars without portfolio, meaning that any one of the people that I was engaged with, that poured into me, who were in movement, that's how they developed their intellectual abilities, through study groups in community. So they didn't go to necessarily, some of them obviously went to classes, some of them went later on, but a lot of them they engaged in collective community study, which meant that you're bringing a robust group of people together who know and who are trying to figure out a knowledge system, a way of understanding the world through a collective understanding. And that's innate in us as people of African descent, and right, that's innate in the philosophical and the knowledge who we are as a people. That's just innate in us, is to be collective. So no, I mean, that is who I am. That is where I was pushed to go into the university to really figure out, as they put it, even to this day, is they don't figure out where we can pick up and move forward. And so I study a lot of I studied political theory. I studied a lot of Black history, or Africana or Black studies, and politics. And so that's what I've been doing. And what actually led me to the work that I do now, which is what I call consciousness formation, really radical consciousness formation. How do we develop a way to understand the information for past, present, and to create a future? And how we do that is not only, I argue, and pretty much a lot of the work, not just be conscious or aware, but to be aware and attempt to do something about it. That is where the collective process come in. So that's where all of my work, my teaching, whether it is on the community, whether it's in the community, whether it's on a global stage, or whether it is in the classroom, that's what I do. We study the way people thought in a particular period in time, extract the ideas, and then try to mold them into this particular period. And so that's generally, I'm busy. I'm generally trying to figure that out.
I see. I see.
And I do that in collective, though. It's not just me. It's just I constantly create collectives, intercollectives. So yeah.
And one of my hashtags and saying that I've been saying for a long time, and I say it kind of every show because I'm trying to make it kind of habitual. You know what I mean? But I say village movement. We really need to get back to that mindset and really embrace and adopt it, because village, we do have a village mindset, but we do it in smaller collectives. I'm talking about a village movement where we all connect, or most of us. And again, I know that's not happening overnight, but again, this is a mindset that I'm trying to kind of promote out there, but I hope you guys, I have my notes out, and I hope you guys do too, because we're going to be dropping a lot of knowledge here today. And I want to make sure that certain particular things that I want the viewers to pay attention to don't get missed while we're talking. But you mentioned something about where our limited finding a way where our limited knowledge meets. That is very important statement that you said there, because again, these are some of the beginning ideas or just things that where we begin to disconnect in how we agree and disagree in conversation. No matter whatever we believe, how strongly we believe something, if we're trying to evolve and grow and grow again as a people, as a community, as a spirit, keyword spirit, um, then I think that we always have to be open, because we're all born into this. This planet has been here for millions of years. So any of us, we're less than babies born into this. So if we start from that kind of mindset, I think it'll be a lot easier to navigate into conversations that you may not always agree on. So again, going into, I want you to touch on that limited knowledge, where we need to join that together, because I think a lot of us sometimes get lost in our own thought process and think that our way of thinking and what we believe is right and is the end all be all.
No, you hit it right on the head, and let me unpack that just a little bit for us, and also those who are going to engage this conversation. And
That's
so,
why we have you on.
right, so this, so what I so I often this the information becomes personal, knowledge becomes collective. And what I mean is that it is a very uncomfortable space to be in with folk that your limits of what you know meet. It resonates with our body, it resonates with our emotion. But if we think about that, that is also a very limited way that was enforced upon us through European systems of knowing. What I mean here is that through European centric thinking is concerned with being scared of what you don't know.
Say that again.
European systems of thinking, European education systems, structures, institutions is always concerned. It creates a sense of scarcity of what you don't know. So it creates a scare. It's like this notion of what you don't know, you should be scared of it. And if you're scared of it, then you attempt to do things to kind of control it, dismiss it, fight it. Now, that broad response, let's look at this specifically with the context of people of African descent. And that's the contradiction, because we're not scared of the unknown. Innately, we're not. We're taught to be scared of the unknown. But we are also people who have a vast understanding of the world that goes, as you say, millions and millions of years, right? So what's happening here is that contradiction and the meeting of those limits of knowing creates a reverberation or creates something, a shaking in most of us, but we still try to figure it out. We still try to do it. We just either try to do it in our own ways. What am I saying? The second thing that Western European systems did is to create and raise up the individual as being the center of all things, which counters who we are as a people, which the individual is not the center of all things. It's our communities, it's our collective, it's our families, whether they're real or imagined, whether they are our cousins who are not our blood cousins, whether they are our brothers who are not our blood brothers, right? So that we create this community of this Ubuntu, this I am because you are, which is a South African concept. So that within itself creates that knowing, that less than knowing. So what you are trying to do, or what you are hitting at when you say be open, when we say be open, what we're really saying is don't be scared of what you don't know.
Yes.
So that in that particular instance, and so until we start to move in a caring manner, and we know this, and so where do we get that scared process from? Because I deal with students consistently, right? I'm dealing with 18, 19-year-old. And as soon as they say something that they think that they know, and I just gently push back, they clam up. So for me, I don't blame them. I don't blame I blame the actual because I understand the European education system, the settler colonial system that we live in, is making them, because teachers use grades as punishment. Parents use and put pressure on our children. So we're all in this particular system. So us and these particular platforms provide that space to, as you say, be open. But what we're really saying is, don't be scared of what you don't know, because what you don't know is important. Because when we go to a particular place, I will be able to lean on you and you will be able to lean on me as we're developing some type of way to address something. So hopefully that makes sense, because I'm dealing with these, what they call these contours of thinking. And so what I do constantly is really push and turn a lot of the questions that we ask ourselves in relation to whether it's Africana history or Black studies, to really kind of break us out of these limited, and also interrogate, who am I accountable to and what I know, which is a third thing. The accountability of knowing becomes important. So not only are we scared, not only are we using limited, but we also scared to know something, because then if you know something, you then have to be responsible for
Exactly.
that, right?
And I think that's definitely something that's plaguing our community on both sides, is the accountability,
Right.
With that being said, uh, I know you mentioned about your students. So when you push back, you said when you push back a little,
Mhm.
you feel that uncomfortableness, and yeah, we all feel it.
Mhm.
But what are some ways that you work through that or help
Mhm.
transition that on both sides?
It so some of the things that I do is one of the things that I do specifically is that I let someone else say it, because what's happening is that they personalize it to me. So what I will do is I will, as I'm beginning to push back gently, I'll say, "Oh, wait," because I'm seeing their faces, I'm feeling their energy. I'm like, "Oh, wait, let's listen and see what Jill Scott says. Let's listen and see what Wise Intelligence says. Let's listen and see what Max Roach, Abby Lincoln." That's why I use a lot of art. I use a lot of other things. Let's listen and see what your favorite artists, well, not their favorite artists a lot of times, but some other artists who
Right.
I know that are doing things, and I use a lot of art. And the reason why I do that is because our students tend to think, I try to use things that they think is like innocuous, as this thing that it doesn't have like some type of most students think art is art. They don't understand that it's political, it's economic, it's also
It's
consciousness
layered.
form. Exactly. So I'll use a lot of things, and then they're like, "Well, wow!" Or I might show something, or may have a colleague come in. So a lot of things I try to disrupt a lot of what they know, but the gentle process. Generally I coax them out. The second thing that I do is include their comment and what they're saying into what I'm saying in the explanation, giving them some type of ownership in the explanation. You know what I mean? So
Yeah, giving them some kind of buy-in into the conversation.
exactly,
Yeah.
exactly. So it's very tough, especially with the young. And it's funny because every time I teach, every semester, I get older and older, they get younger and younger. So a lot of times I have to remember, and I do that because I don't look at my students as students. I look at them first as human beings. I look at them, not just as students, but they're human beings who have been on this earth 18 years. I've been up here, been on this earth 30 years, sometimes more longer than them. So I shouldn't expect them, to do certain things, because again, I think collectively, I think, communally in a global sense. So a lot of times what I do in my class, in the classroom, and again, I don't even like to call it a classroom, is really like a place where we just think about a lot of stuff. We think,
I like that.
which is, and they counterintuitive, especially now because I'm in the finals and their grades and all this other ridiculous stuff. They're like, "Well, Dr. Poe." Anyway, that's a whole different story. But but I tell them, like, I can measure you based upon what you've put into this class. Like, even though you may have not did well on this particular paper, this whatever, you also attempted to do something extra, because I give them extra things like videos, whatever, something to kind of supplement. This is also very important to me, because not only am I, and the reason why I say I try to disrupt the classroom is because I do a lot of stuff in community. I do a
Mhm.
lot of political education. I do a lot of folk who work 40, 50 hours a week who want to read Black history and theory, right? And my job is to help guide them to the knowledge that they already have within themselves. Only thing I figure my job is, or I think that my job is a guider. I don't teach anybody anything, because I'm still learning myself. So I don't even think. I mean, our ancient African ancestors, even in on the continent, had to go through a process. A lot of times, there was a process for them to even become a student that could have took 20 to 30 years, even to become a student, right? And this is to be able to understand some of the systems and knowledge within which they were attempting to understand. So for me, I take that particular approach. I'm still learning, so we can guide and think together. So being in community, doing this on a global scale, on a stage as well, because I work with communities in Cuba. I work with communities not only obviously here in the United States, but in Kenya, on the continent. I work with communities in Brazil. There's also some differences, particularly with the young folk, and also particularly with young folk in outside of the United States, people of African descent, or either on the continent. There's some differences, growing stark differences, and they are
Mhm.
seeking knowledge, and them seeking them understanding with students here, or with younger folk here, whether they're in school or whether they're out of school. So I think that is important, to kind of plug. But yeah, so those are some of the things. But it could be, it could be, honestly, it's funny because I'm also moody. So it
Okay.
could be, and so what I
I've
mean
been
is,
known to be that from time to time.
okay, go good. Well, we get
But
along
that's
great,
natural. I'm a
right?
woman, so I don't
Right.
know.
Well, I was raised by a whole. I was raised. I have four sisters. I have three aunts who from a second marriage of my mom's mom, and so they were with me. So I tell everybody I was raised. Who I am, you could blame all of them. Blame all my sisters. Blame all my
Oh, I don't
aunts.
know. I thought you was gonna give us more. You said blame. I don't know. I got a show for you to come on.
Okay, good. Bad
I was
word.
gonna,
Bad choice of
I was
words.
gonna, I was gonna
Credit
bring
them.
you on for us sisters, but I don't know.
Oh,
Either way, it
credit
works.
them. Credit them. You're right. Bad choice of word. I'm just talking to people
And
who
we're all
often
talking about
say
raising the level of communications today, Doc.
exactly. And thank you for doing that. As you see, I don't mind my limits of knowledge. I'm okay with that.
Hey,
I could be, bad choice of word.
but
But yeah, I
go
get you
ahead and
though.
finish that thought, and then I want to pause because I want to make sure I don't lose what I have to ask you.
Okay, sure. So in that particular instance, it's just based upon the rhythms of the students and the rhythms of what's happening. And so for you, as you are constantly trying to raise the level, so am I. So I constantly check my mood. I constantly check what it is that I'm attempting to do. I constantly check my language, in those particular things, and also and welcome being checked on my language, because language, and I'll make this last point, language that we use carry ideas, and those ideas create the environment within which we're building with someone.
Mhm. Okay, so I want to ask you about you have something that you do with your students called a decolonization journey. I
Mm,
want you to share that because we're talking about you dealing with the youth and how they're ever changing, with each year, um, and how to navigate that as we're becoming aging adults. Because
mhm,
some of this is just part of our transition as well. So, in
mhm,
order to keep our minds in a certain forward way of thinking, we constantly have to challenge ourselves as we're
mhm,
aging. So, what do you see in today's students from, I would say, 10 years ago?
mm. Oh my goodness. Let me just first say this: young people are young people, no matter what generation, right?
I agree. And they're going to be who they are. They
And they're
have
gonna
to.
exactly. So I mean, honestly, because we live in a system that creates very limited ways and rewards and punishes us to live within those definitions of those systems, a lot that I would say the change has been the way that we communicate. Obviously a lot of, perfect example. we used to think that students were very good at technology. So a lot of us, particularly my not necessarily me, but my parents would be like, "Well, let me get you guys to do my computer. Let me get." And so I actually, up until 3 years ago, I was thinking that students were very, they were very apt at using technology. They're not. They're not. They know how to use apps. And the app that they know how to use is usually TikTok and Instagram or maybe some social media. But being able to use technology in any form, as I'm thinking about this, you actually make me think about this. Hopefully I will need to get this.
Oh, good.
I need to get it.
I was hoping I challenged your thought process.
No, it's no,
Gave you something to think about.
yeah, I look for that, right? I look for that consistently because that also goes to answer your question. How do we challenge ourselves? Constantly look for things that challenge the way that make us think about things. And so back to what I was saying is that one of the things, they have more access to information, but don't know how to use it. When 10 years ago, there still was this, everything wasn't digital. You still had to sometimes go to the library. You still had to sometimes, actually talk to somebody,
You had
right?
to do research. You actually had
Do
to
research.
research. Yeah.
Exactly. In any form. And I don't think research is just this academic, go to libraries and study. It could be talking to your aunt. It could be seeking directions to go around the corner to a store. What I mean? That's research, right?
Yeah.
That's, all of those things. That has changed tremendously in the past 10 years, because what has happened is that while other groups of people have been not fully, but have been at least introduced to how do we navigate this influx of information, our particularly students who come from African descendant communities and other poor communities don't do that. They have not been able to be exposed to that. So for me, the biggest change is the tenacity to seek an answer, right? Through any type of means necessary. Now, if they Google it and it don't pop up on that first page,
They're over it.
they're done.
I
They
think that's
done.
most of us, though. As far as in the Western world, I definitely think in
You,
the Western world.
you're probably right. Which also goes back to the reason why I'm glad you made me think about this is the reason why we have to be clear, and I can't blame them, because this is a societal thing that trickles down to something like a classroom, right?
Hmm.
And we think that the classroom somehow is separated from the social structure that we live in, but it's not. It is everything
Exactly.
comes. Matter of fact, we get it.
Everything is a part of it. Everything's a part of it.
It is concentrated. Listen, let me tell you, the stuff that comes into the classroom, it is concentrated, and we have to navigate that, right? And then of course I teach at HBCU, so then there's all of these structures. You know what? Let me pause on that question right now, because when we change this the dynamic of this,
Yeah,
but
yeah,
it's
yeah.
it's tough. Put it that way. It's very
I
tough.
got
Like
you. I got you. So, okay, with that being said, I found it interesting about when I heard about your decolonization journey
mm,
that you do with the
mhm,
students. So, tell the viewers about that, because I think that is an important piece that you do
yeah,
there, because you know a lot of times, and again, we're talking about the age of social media and the internet,
mhm,
and we're being bombarded with
yeah.
so much. I think visually these days is sometimes the best way to really digest if you're trying to understand something. So if you could share that with the viewers.
Yeah, no, absolutely. Thank you for that. I'm actually going to be relaunching, the program. Actually, we're going to be going to Kenya next in 2023. But
Wow.
this project came out of out of study actually. And what this project is, and I'm going to try to keep it short, but
You got
this
time. It's
project.
okay.
Okay, good. So what this project came out of is exactly what you're hinting at, with the ideas and the images and the way that Africa, Africans, and people of African descent have been depicted. Um, we know through history that most of the ideas, the depictions, and the stereotypes and notions historically that were placed upon Africa and people of African descent being less than human and all those things, not having history, were actually put on by intellectuals in European universities who never set foot on a continent of Africa, right?
Mhm.
What they were actually doing was is that not I'm not let me be clear. This is my academic, right? I don't want to make that generalized. Most of them did not.
Okay.
Most of them did not. I would say
Yeah,
like
because you know
90.
somebody will come back and
Yeah, be like, oh, such and such. Yeah, I
exactly
got
have
it.
a whole debate.
And listen, and they'll find it. People find stuff everywhere. They'll pull up,
Uh-huh.
conversations, libation, and be like, oh.
Exactly. At 11.15 seconds.
Right. Right. Most of them, right? Well, majority of them, a large majority of them, we do know that there are enough that we know that did not. But how did they develop their ideas, right? They developed their ideas by a lot of adventurers, a lot of folk who were moving and who were traveling, to the continent and to these spaces, and they kept journals. They kept, ideas. Christopher Columbus kept a journal about his experiences with the new world, right?
Uh-huh.
So that becomes important. So what ended up happening is that I thought that it was important, and this is not to say that our ancestors, particularly African ancestors, did not keep writings and journals. They did. What I'm just trying to introduce is the fact that uh, in the 21st century, let's turn the tables on the mass majority of the literature and the discourse that was kept through like journals, that was kept through like the way that Africa and people of African descent were taught. Let's create a class that actually, not only as we're talking and engaging in the history, and I'll just use one example because there are a few places we go. I'll just use Kenya. Not only do we understand the history, the continuities in knowledge, the continuities in culture, arts, all that stuff, we actually go in the middle of the semester. But this time we're not going to go in the middle of the semester, but we go in the middle of the semester to really disrupt, to really give folk, our students, a real robust understanding of what they're studying is real, right? And what we do is that I get students to kind of really walk back this process of racist folk going to study in Africa, keeping journals, and they were racist. But now it's like, now we have young folk who out of North Carolina and DC and other places, some of them never been outside of the United States, and the furthest place that they've probably been is on a cruise with their parents. They're now going across the world to really understand or deconstruct this form of knowing that places African and people of African descent at the bottom of the world. When they go, they're like, wait a minute, this is something different. And so when
Mhm.
they go, it just touches every aspect of our of these young folk, not only from the aesthetic, the way that they look and understand and see themselves in these places, and also see people. I constantly get students that look just like my brother, they look just like my cousin, they look just like, they also say, well, wait a minute, like they know more about us than we know about them, right? So they're constantly, we put young people together. So
And then I can
usually.
imagine that's gotta be um the feeling that you get or experience being on the land and seeing people that look like yourself. I mean, it's different. We have immigrants here that we see, and I get mistaken for Ethiopian all the time. But to be on the land and see brothers and sisters that have similar features as yourself, and then it makes you process things on a much deeper level of our history, and and I think it affects us on multiple levels, whether we realize it or not, whether we're conscious of it or not. The depth of hurt
Mm,
and
mm.
yeah, the depth of hurt and the lack of information that we really have about who we are as a people.
Listen, you said something very important just now. You said when they touch the land, that is absolutely so. We get there. We take. I get them to. We go to different places, and I make sure that they literally feel the land. They take off their shoes, they squat down, they put their hands on the land in the places that we get. So that level of reverberation of the spirituality of being connected, not only does, and I will say, not only does it also highlight the hurt, but it highlights the joy. It highlights
Yes.
this, this pendulum. And so there, students cry. Students, sometimes they're like, it doesn't affect them until a few days later, or we're on the plane back and they're like, I don't want to leave. It's all of those things. So
Yeah,
that connection is very real. I'm glad you
yeah,
teach.
let me not, leave out joy and
Yeah.
celebration. I
Yeah.
didn't mean, I was focused more on that, but I definitely I can relate to that because the whole way, my whole being of what I've grown into as a young woman, is because of the strength and the pride and the rich history that
Yeah.
I know our people have,
Mhm.
makes me want to be and show up differently,
Yeah.
and be a better person. So yeah, definitely. That's got to be a beautiful experience. You would probably been one of my favorite teachers. It's not
Oh,
too late to take your class,
oh,
right?
no, you absolutely can. Absolutely.
I'm
I
not too old
appreciate
to
that.
take your class. I would love to take your class.
Listen, just hearing hearing that, because I hear the opposite so much from my, because they complaining, but then years later, it's funny that you say that, just to hear that I would love to take your class. You were my favorite professor. I'll probably
Mhm.
get one of those, maybe a semester. But what happens is that, man, sometimes 5 years after they graduate, I'll get this email saying, Dr. Pope, thank you. I didn't appreciate it then. And I tell students from day one, I'm saying, half of what I'm about to tell you, half of what we're going to engage in, you're not even going to get right now. You're not even going, because I'm literally trying to, as you say, raise the level of consciousness. I'm
Mhm.
very clear about, a lot of times we're not very honest with our young folk, and especially when we're telling about education and we're telling about school and the universities. They are very important. Don't get, I'm not saying that they're not, but we have to be clear about the fact that a lot of times, depending upon the university and how they go through the university and how they're coached through the university, it actually does them a disservice. What I mean is that I tell students, like, you're not going to find any answers here. You're gonna, by the time you leave this session or this thinking lab that we're engaged in, I want you to have more questions, because those questions are going to set you on a journey for the rest of your life. I just want you to constantly question, how do you see yourself, not only in relation to a society that don't want to accept you, but how do you see yourself in relation to the people in the communities that do want to accept you? And
Mm.
that becomes something very important. So then they try to go find those communities, right? So then it creates an idea in their mind that, okay, if this society is not trying to accept me as a human being, police brutality, mass incarceration, and blah, blah, on and on and on. But there are collectives, there are people who are doing things in these what I call quilombos, or these maroon communities, such as the collective here, right? It's what
Mhm.
you're doing here, raising it. This is part of a maroon communities. This is what I said. We have the answers. We've already done all of this. It just looks different.
Right.
It's 21st century. We're doing this now, but 100 years ago, I probably would have been going through the swamps to come over to have a conversation with you, or how we going to disrupt this plantation down the street. You know what I'm
Right.
saying? You know,
Exactly.
you know what I'm saying?
Exactly.
Now we can just pick up the phone, jump. I could be anywhere. I could be in Mexico. I could be in whatever, doing, and we can have this conversation. But yeah, I think that, this notion of, I try to make sure that, I awaken, and let me be clear, my I say students, but again, they're people.
Mhm.
Because I have a range. I have students in my class, even to this right now, who've come back to school. Like, they have families, they are working. They're just like, everybody will not consider to be, I hate this term, a non-traditional student, right? Whatever that
Oh,
means.
yeah.
Whatever that means. I hate that term. Like, I'm like, no, we all are students. Somebody took a pause. Let's
Well, what do they say? Any wise man, you'll never, I forget how you exactly say it, but it's something to the nature of, a wise man can never be wise or never will end up in that position if he stays in the same place,
Hmm.
if that makes sense.
It makes
I
perfect
know I
sense.
know I'm not saying it exactly right, but
As you said it right for this moment. So
yeah. Thank you. Thank you so much. But, I think, it's so many, I might have to
yeah.
have you back on the show because there's so many questions that are just kicking up as the more that we talk. But,
Mhm.
I want to talk about, getting back as we kind of come to a close, and we can keep on,
Mm.
but as we're coming to a close, I want to make sure that we don't lose the point as we're coming to that end about
Right, right,
raising
right,
the level of frequency. I mean,
right,
raising the level of communication.
right.
I think my perspective, a lot of or part of the problem um, with that is how we are approaching these conversations and how we look at them. And what I mean by that is we're approaching them from a now, from a physical standpoint versus a spiritual. And I think that's very, very important when we're talking about communication and why we keep staying in the same place and not really getting anywhere. We all believe in a higher being, yet we are so engulfed in this physical realm that regardless of what we say, most of the things we do are like we don't believe in a higher being.
Mm.
So I think again about raising the collective consciousness. We need to get back to the mindset of thinking from more of a spiritual level.
I want to highlight something that you just said just now. You said most of the things that we do it's like we don't believe in something higher. That is a summation of exactly what it is. And that was by design. Let me be clear.
Hmm.
There was one of the first things that Europeans, and yes, I am one of those particular people that will talk about the structures and the institutions of the colonial, the neo-colonial structures that inhibit African and people of African descent to fully realize who we are to do something that Amilcar Cabral talked as return to the source. Amilcar Cabral was a revolutionary leader who said that African, as he's in the middle, as he's developing to kick out the Portuguese from Guinea-Bissau, he says that in order for our revolution to maintain, we have to return to the essence of who we are, our cultural essence of African people, who, by the way, doesn't necessarily always look the same, even across Guinea-Bissau, because it's made up of different groups. The idea is the essence of communalism, being able to define continuities, being able to respect those types of things. So back to what you're saying, I absolutely 100% agree. And I spend a lot of time trying to figure out how do we balance the seen and unseen forces that are constantly pulling and tugging and pushing us in directions. Again, we think that we move in a life or we move in society, even through education, that it doesn't have some type of impact on the seen, I mean, on the unseen.
Hmm.
Meaning this, to give you a more clear example, when we talk about colonization, we talk about forms of knowing, the curriculums that are taught. Take a HBCU, for instance. If you go through an HBCU and you take classes where you do not see the professor, majority of your classes, the majority of what you're actually being exposed to in the curriculum does not relate to your ancestral and historical presence in this world, it don't matter whether you came from an HBCU or not. You're going to be doing something that Frantz Fanon said is black skin, white mask. You're just going to be a person thinking in the same context of the colonizer or the system, and then that's how we treat each other,
And
right? So this, go ahead.
not to interrupt you, but
Oh,
I do
please,
want to kind of just jump in right there because
please.
a lot of people, a lot of us, and not just us, a lot of us in our community and outside of our community, as far as non-black, uh, when statements like that are said, that they can be dismissed very easily.
Mhm.
And how can you even begin to take on, or yeah, how do you even begin to take on another culture and represent it through yourself if you have no clue of who you are?
Right, right, right.
So.
Because what ends up happening in that statement, what I said, I am that, because most people rely, and particularly, and no people, John Henry Clark said something that's very, very important. He said, Black folk will out Muhammad, and out Moses, right?
Yeah.
So that is such a profound, because so when Europeans made and literally punished African families and communities to set aside their cultural inclinations to be collective and to divine them their individuality as based upon the collective and then extract this individual. You black folk, African people, African, they're the most individual, they're individualists of the because it's a lie because Europeans are not even individuals, right?
Mhm,
They're like,
mhm.
we go do stuff, we go act like we fighting each other, but when it's time for us to turn our attention to Africa, when it's time to
We
turn our
gonna work
attention to,
together.
we go work together, right? Right, so it's like this, and so it's a very, very important, and I always like to, and I think about that because it's the first thing people will say, well, James, where's the personal accountability? The personal accountability has to be what you said. It has to be based upon a knowledge of who you are in relation to the communities within which you come from. If those communities do not have structures and institutions of accountability, then it's a free for all. And European folk are sitting back. People who, let me be clear, white supremacists are sitting back, being like, "Oh yeah, we love this. Yeah, yeah, yeah. Tell them your truth. Tell them like your truth. Like tell them this, that." It's like, wait a minute, And so I say that to say is that individualism is like a religion to to African descended people, and
Mm.
we don't even see that. We don't even, and so but we feel it because it's innate in us. It is written in our DNA, our spiritual, our mental, our physical DNA to be collective. We're constantly trying to do that, but we don't accept that, we don't engage in that critical conversation of this contradiction, right? Anyway, what you said was absolutely, you actually said it better than me. I'm going to quote you, and I
Well,
circled it
thank
here,
you.
you know, because it was such a profound statement. Because I like, and this is the wisdom of us as a people. We can summarize very complex millions and hundreds and thousands of years of knowledge in just short statements. That's our genius, right?
Well, they say, I mean, I'm not fully on board with it. I can slightly understand it, but they say ebonics or
Mhm,
slang
mhm.
rather is going to become like the new future or one of the future languages that'll carry us on. Have you heard anything like that?
I I I've experienced that. So
Okay.
so so Ebonics is a very important period, and again, I know we have to go, but
No, no, we
it,
we can keep going.
okay,
I'll
okay,
yeah, yeah, because I got some more questions I want to ask you.
good. So Ebonics has been given a bad rap, and the way that it was approached, because it was something that was very important to disrupt very early on.
I love how you
Uh,
keep I love how you keep using the word disrupt because we're gorilla gremlins over at Spliffs and Mischief. And disrupt, a lot of people take that word, it has a negative connotation. In
mm,
this way, it's not a negative connotation. I think
mm,
a lot of times when we're talking about disrupting things, and we can unpack this kind of conversation a little bit later, and more of a raising arms and those kind of things. We're talking
mhm,
about disrupting our minds.
mhm, mhm, mhm,
So you got to start there first in order to change, some of the old ways of thinking. We have to disrupt and kind of mix that up a little bit. So I just love how you use that throughout the conversation today. Continue. I'm sorry.
No, no problem. Thank you. And also you're making me again, I love this conversation because I love for us to think together. Ngugi wa Thiong'o, a famous Kenyan writer. He's actually exiled. Well, he's actually been able to go back to Kenya. He did a lot of work on this called Decolonizing the Mind. He wrote a
Mhm.
book called Decolonizing the Mind. And there have been scholars and other folk who are also not only scholars but also activists and thinkers who also deal with this notion of what we're talking about is how do we disrupt not only our own and disrupting our own way that we thinking, literally ask the question of, well, how do I know what I know? Because
Mhm.
what you may find is what you actually don't. We know little, but we know a lot, but we understand very little, right? So that's something that's very, very important to kind of throw in there. um I kind of actually lost my point, lost with you.
It's okay. Okay, so while you're doing that, I have mine.
Yeah,
Um,
please.
I wanna so, I brought up the spiritual side. I felt like that was
Yes,
important that I needed to touch
yes,
on,
yes.
that communication and spirituality, they coincide in a very big
Yeah.
piece, if not one of the main pieces in why we continue to have the dysfunctions in our communications.
Mm,
But next part of it is, how do I word this or frame this so it makes sense? Where does evolution and tradition meet? Or because we're in this time now, I think you kind of see where I may be going. Um, we're in this time now, everything is on warp speed, and evolution, we are going to evolve. We've always evolved, but in the last, what, 50 to 70 years, we've, with the age of the internet and the computer, we've hit a warp speed. The evolution now, I think we aren't even keeping up with the evolution that we think we are evolving to. I
mm,
think we're moving in it, kind of like what we were talking about with the kids,
mhm,
in the information. We're a part of it. We're experiencing it. We're adopting it.
mhm,
Um, and again, there's a lot of good things and positive things that come from that, but as we can see, because we're having this conversation today, there's a lot of negative energy that's
mm,
coming from that as well. And when that is challenged or questioned about evolution versus tradition, of losing our traditional ways, those two, those are one of those areas that gets a little tricky. So, I think, you having the background that you have, I'd like to get your thoughts on, should we, are we evolving to the point where tradition is just coming a thing of the past? Because tradition is our foundation. No matter how much we evolve, tradition is the groundwork. It's the data left there. So we'll always know how to find our path or get back on that path to enlightenment, because we're talking about
mhm,
raising the
mhm,
frequency. So I'm gonna pause
mhm.
there.
No, this is a great question. Oh my God, this is a great question. I would first have to ask, and if you don't mind, I can,
Sure.
to ask what is it? And this question is a very important question, specifically because I always want to figure out. There's a book that let me first give us some academic sources or whatever, some sources that people can.
Well, I know,
uh,
because these questions, and again, because we're both trying to lay this stuff out
mhm,
where
mhm,
it's received,
mhm, mhm,
and not trying to overwhelm the listeners,
mhm,
but
mhm,
also trying to give you enough information so it's not just so much in layman's
mhm,
terms, that we're
mhm,
also giving you again those breadcrumbs that lead you back to sources where you can
mhm.
go search and uncover this information yourself.
Thank you. 'Cause this question is such a question because I feel it, like I feel this question. I don't know if it's that green tea or if it's just maybe a combination of this green tea, or
It's that
but
synergy. I
it's
like
that
to think I
synergy.
like to think I let off a little type of
Listen,
synergy,
it
and
is
whoever.
absolutely, yeah, absolutely. You have got me revved up. Thank you. I was trying to chill the rest of the Sunday. I mean, it's Saturday. You got me in Sunday. I was just
Well,
Saturday.
that's all
So
right. That's all right. We in warp speed. But the funny thing is, I'm sitting here. I'm like, I got Pope coming on. I'm like, what am I going to talk to him about? I was like, because my thing is, I always got to spin it my way. I
yeah,
don't want to
yeah, yeah,
oversaturate you with
yeah,
just
yeah,
all this. So I
yeah,
just enjoy what that the conversation that we're having
yeah.
today.
No, this is great. Let me ask this, because this is a question I think that is very important, because whenever this question or some form of it comes up, I have to ask. Let me back up for a second. Let me just first give a source. Kwame Gyekye, Gyekeye, wrote a book called Tradition and Modernity. Unfortunately, Gyekye passed away. He's a Ghanaian philosopher who wrote a book called Tradition and Modernity, and he actually tried to deal with this question from an African
Mhm.
descended perspective. There's also Maladoma Some, again, who passed away. Him and his wife did a lot of work on this notion of Some as SOME, with one of those little divots over the E.
Libationz, yeah.
And so they've done a lot of thinking through this. And Malidoma Some and his wife really writes in a way that I'll get the reason I gave two sources because one source, of course, is it's a little bit more academic.
Mhm.
Uh, you can get the points, but then Malidoma Some and his wife writes in a way that it's a broader audience. Both of these together will be beneficial. But now let me get to what I'm trying to tease out here, because what I think is that we're missing, or we're placing a question on something that may not lead us to the answer. It leads us to a cyclical conversation.
Mm.
What I mean is that when we talk about evolution and tradition, are we talking about evolution in the context of the material ways of how we communicate, how we engage each other? And then are we relegating tradition in a very limited sense? That, because for me, tradition is based upon culture. And then culture is not defined by what we call the mechanisms or the artifacts, meaning that culture is not defined by the music, the food, the language, blah,
Mhm.
blah, blah. Culture is defined by the morals, the standards, the values that guide the way that we treat each other, but also other people, nature, and the universe. So I often ask, what are we trying to leave behind? Are we trying to leave behind the morals, the standards, the values that have moved for thousands of years,
Mhm.
right?
Right, right.
That still are universal, because treating you in a way that respects your humanity regardless of how you would like to identify yourself, right? As opposed to treating you properly no matter what day and time, whether it's 500 years or 500 years in the future or 500 years in the past. I
Mhm.
would say we never should leave that behind. That is, those universal principles are very important. And those are the things and the reason why your question becomes very complex is because when you talk about this in the context of Africa and African descended people, these are the things that are foundations of knowledge systems, of language, of understanding that the words that I use on a day-to-day basis, whether it was 6,000 years ago, carried power and magic in them, still is the same way today, even though we
Mhm.
don't pay attention to them. Because if, just like you correctly corrected me in my in my statement of blame, because it does carry, even though I didn't intentionally mean it that way, but it
Mhm.
did carry a way of understanding that some people may say, wait a minute, but that may inflict an energy. So for us, it was like it was fine, it was good, but somebody else may be like, I'm ready to fight you. That's energy.
Exactly.
You see what I'm saying? So
Exactly.
I always want to, I always, in this question, I think that the question is what do we, so for me, if we're saying tradition, meaning that it is based upon the foundational principles that were placed by our ancestors to treat each other, to treat other people, but also nature and the universe properly, we never should leave that behind, right? Then the question becomes, how do we transmit that? Through this, through text, through Zoom. You see what I'm saying? So now, so what, you get what I'm saying? So I don't know if I gave you an answer because I'm still trying,
No,
you
no, no,
know,
you did, you did. I think that's one of those conversations that, has to be compartmentalized depending on how we're approaching it. But,
yeah,
I appreciate your response.
yeah,
And
yeah,
again, we're I love it, and, it can be very challenging, these waters that we're in. It's very
yeah,
sensitive times,
yeah, yeah, yeah,
and trying to, um, lay clarity and uniting people.
yeah,
It
yeah,
it
yeah.
and information isn't the easiest thing to do. You gotta get creative with it when you're trying to disrupt things.
Yes. Which
But,
which is the answer, I think, which is the answer to this whole question of, this notion of evolution and tradition. So yeah, I think, yeah, we have to be creative. How do we not compromise those principles? Those people say ancient principles, but they're actually what I call ancient future principles, because they're going to carry us to a particular place that we want to actually create. So anyway, I'm sorry, I didn't
I
mean to cut
agree.
you
I
off.
agree. Well, it has been nothing short of a pleasure having you on today. Any
Okay.
last thoughts that you want to leave
No,
the people with on this conversation before we close out today?
no, I mean, thank you. I really appreciated this. Thank you for getting me revved up on my Saturday. I'm ready. I
Ready to
do
take on
really
the world.
Yes, I really do appreciate this. Getting me to think, about the way that I think, and I look for these, and I really appreciate that. I really appreciate what you're doing, and also the collective is doing, attempting to disrupt. Um, and a lot of folk who know me, that is one of my. I think I probably need to get that tattoo somewhere on me. I'm constantly trying to disrupt something, like constantly.
You should. You should. you know, make it your imprint. But
Right, right, right.
I appreciate you, having you on today, just helping me to clarify some things to the people that I may not translate in the best sometimes. Uh but I think this is a continued conversation, and I got so many other things that came up while we were talking today. But before we close out, I'd love for you to plug your Africa World project.
Oh yeah, so it's a multimedia educational program that has many components. That has a film festival. We run three of the biggest film festivals, African film festivals, or African related film festivals in the DC metropolitan area. Matter of fact, this coming March is going to be another iteration of our new African Film Festival, which is in a
Okay,
partnership with.
congratulations.
Thank you, thank you. It's in a partnership with AFI Silver Theater, which is also a part of the American Film
Okay.
Institute. In I guess they're in LA. Yeah, they're actually in LA. And so we feature, films. We use films as an educational component. Africa Will Nail Project is also a radio program and podcast, but of course, podcast is just the way that we digest
Uh-huh.
the radio. So it has many different components to it. And I also need to make sure that I plug our sister program, which is Africa Now, which is a program that I first started out on along with a colleague of mine, Mawiza Mutali, who's Malawi. He's actually in Malawi now. And this program is on WPFW in Washington, D.C., 89. Oh my goodness.
Yeah,
Eighty-nine
89.3.
point
I'm a
three.
fan of PFW. I'm here to support you, my brother.
I appreciate, thank you.
89.3.
Limit our
I
limits
actually
of
think I've
knowledge.
Yeah, that's okay. We're here to support each other. I think I've actually listened into Africa Now over
Okay.
the years
Okay.
at some point in
Perfect.
time. I
Perfect.
do occasionally when I'm on my real adulting,
Yeah.
and I'm in the car by myself and I just kind
Yeah.
of want to mellow out. PFW is one of those that I turn
Yeah.
on.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah.
So go ahead. Anything else you want to share?
No, no, that's pretty much it. I mean, I'm still trying to do stuff. Still trying to make a difference.
Hey, aren't we all? Well, we
Yeah.
appreciate the things that you're doing. And again, if you guys want to hear more from James, please support his Africa World Project. Support WPFW, his radio show, and the things coming out of PFW. It's a lot of edutainment coming out of the city, guys. Again, thank you so much for joining us today on Libations and Conversations. Guys, some news for you. Libations and Conversations has been picked up on cpiradio.org. So it is now streaming off the platform. Please support, along with some of the other educational programs that are coming off of the station. Also, shout out to power357radio.com, to Samo and the gang. Check out Burn Unit on Fridays from 9 to 11 p.m. and No Man Mondays at 7 p.m. with the gang. And always to my brothers over at the Spliffs and Mischief Godcast channel. Peace is a village movement. We out.